web-based resources and linking and communicating with other colleagues with the interest that we have in our own disciplines and other disciplines. And I wonder if you've used some of the conceptual framework of the knowledge management approach or discipline itself, because there's a lot of what you mentioned about explicit knowledge. It's very related to the knowledge management proposition. And
Tanaki's framework.
Exactly, from tacit to knowledge to explicit knowledge. And I think the fact that we are challenged by how to document that tacitness of the knowledge, which is explicited in our room, I mean in our classrooms, in the way that we handle new technologies for communicating, for example, as blogging, which we can use with the students, for students expressing how they process knowledge. So I was wondering if you have some kind of related, theory about that.
Well, I mean, I guess the other thing is I think I have a mic here.
Oh, okay.
I think so, apparently. They'll tell me if I don't. The notion of explicit knowledge, I don't agree with the implicit knowledge distinction. I think once we make something explicit, it's just basically information, right? Knowledge is something we have to connect, right? So if I say this is what I think, it's nothing until you connect it. But if the information is there, you can critique it and challenge it and question it. So I think that's where I would draw a slight distinction between the work of especially in knowledge management, implicit, explicit. And it's very tough to manage knowledge. I think it's impossible, really. Most people, when they talk about knowledge management, they really mean information management. They want a place to be able to store data and make data available. But in order for it to become anything useful, I think you have to connect it. You have to connect pieces together. But I guess it gets to the same idea that I said earlier, is that all of these, there's no such thing as a completely novel idea. All ideas have a legacy, and there's bits and pieces here and bits and pieces there, and you just kind of pull them together when we come to a new understanding or a new insight on a subject. So I'm not sure if that quite gets to what you're saying, but...
I have two questions. One is there's a distinction between knowledge and understandings. So for the past 10 years, there's some articles and a lot of cognitive theories that are working on the difference of knowledge and understanding. And as educators, we have to go to the understanding part, not only the knowledge. In where you place all the theory of the connective theory that you propose in the knowledge understanding levels. And the second one is that I'm interested in, you say in one part that universities have to go to one-on-one person, have to be one-on-one interactions. Do you see that your learning theory can be placed in the school place too? Because, if something is at university, that have to be in the school level. Have you?
Yeah. Well, can I start with the second one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, there is I think some options from a school, like a K to 12 level. That's what when you say school, it's a primary, secondary. There have been, I think, people who are better informed on that area than I am. People like Will Richardson and David Warlick and others that have been looking at what does it mean to learn in connective environments in a K to 12 system. So it's not an area I've looked at explicitly, but I know from their perspective and what I've read that they've talked about, it's quite similar to some of the ideas that I would at least suggest or put forward. Learning through social networks, interacting, student autonomy, the ability to form and to connect in those systems. I think there's value in that network learning model at the K to 12 level. The difference, though, is because in a university level, the emphasis is on autonomy, right? Personal control, those kinds of things. Whereas in a K to 12 sector, there's a power relationship that you don't have in university, right? Someone who's 8 years old doesn't have the awareness or sense of self that someone who's 21 years old might have. And so you do need to recognize that there's a different power relationship, which I don't know what the implications of that are, I just know it's there. And K to 12 educators need to be thinking on that particularly. But there was in the recent, the TEDx New York conference, there was a gentleman by the name of Dan Mayer that presented. He was looking at it from a math perspective, but he really looked at how do you strip away shovel curriculum, that you sort of broadcast to students, and how do you replace it with depth of thinking curriculum? And he gave some really good examples. You might want to look at that video where he talks about how he teaches math in order to develop deep understanding and connections between ideas in a math context. He was very focused on the I think it was, I don't even know what grade level, but it was K to 12 anyway. Now, getting back to your first question. Understanding and knowledge. I guess I'd have to ask you first, how do you see knowledge being different from understanding? If I have knowledge of something, how is that different from if I have understanding? Just so I make sure I answer your question the right way.
Knowledge is that you know what is happening, and understanding is that at the level that you can explain, that you can analyze, and in a deeper, you have a deeper knowledge. Like leaping map, profound understanding, that you can comprehend, you can synthesize, you can analyze.
Okay. Because it looks like you're getting into some of Bloom's taxonomy, and with the understanding and understanding is a base, but synthesizing and creation and that. So there's a little bit of that there. And also hearing a bit of the understanding by design kind of an instructional framework as well seems to be in there. Just speaking off the top of my head, I think I would really, because even so the terms of using understanding is depth of knowledge. Then I think I would stay with the term knowledge and just look at gradients of knowledge instead of looking at a new term to describe the gradient. So in that regard, I would say it's sort of like saying, if you have knowledge as a newcomer to a field, let's say a novice, usually what you'll have is a weak sense of connections between ideas and concepts. And there's a really good text, if you're interested, the Cambridge Handbook of Experts and Expertise, that you may find valuable in this regard, that looks at how do experts think differently than novice individuals. And a lot of it's coming from research that's been, chess and a high-stress field, some of the work that Gary Klein has done in his book, Sources of Power. And what they discover is that novices think linearly and sequentially, typically, right? Because that's how they've been taught to a degree, whereas experts think in patterns. Right, so an expert can quickly look at a situation and sort of extract and get some key ideas out of it. And so from that perspective, I guess I would say a novice has a weak conceptual connection structure of knowledge, whereas an expert has an integrated connection, the integrated knowledge structure, which means they don't just have a sense of, this is how I do this step, but they also understand if I change this part of the step, this will be the outcome. So short answer would be, I would look at understanding as a function of depth of knowledge, which means I would be comfortable just using depth of knowledge instead of understanding to describe that.
Well, thank you very much. We now have to move.
A little question. I have time?
1 minute.
Okay, because I have a question that came up, not mine, came up before. Any connection between... Sorry. I have a question that came up before from other people. Any connection between the edupunk movement and connectivism? What would you make of it?
Well, see, I think the edupunk is intended to be more political and social, and I've tried to stay more so in terms of just teaching and learning. So there are political and social dimensions that occur within the learning process, but I haven't commented on it specifically. So I wouldn't necessarily draw connections, but if someone else wants to, I would let them. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That way? Okay. Sneak through here.